true is because if the universe were just feelingless automata, robots, plants are feelingless automata. I mean, all they do is this. But even if we had fancy ones that did everything that we could do, but there was no feeling at all, just doing. There would still, first of all, there would be no hard problem. Remind yourself, in a universe with no feeling, even with all of the capacity, this lecture would be going on, paradoxically. We'd be talking about something and we'd be exchanging words, but the stuff we were talking about would be an empty set. By the way, did you follow that? We'd be talking about feelings, but if everybody's a robot, what would we really be talking about? None of us would have them. In this, Dennett is right. In the sense that if the universe were a robot universe, then when we talked about feeling, what we would really be talking about, although we could never bring it out, would be simply inferring the internal states of others. Not the feelings of others, but the internal states. Just like I do when I see you scowl at me and I say, God, he's going to attack me, right? I'm inferring that I'm going to about to get attacked, and so I run. That's all just robotic behavior, right? And Dennett suggested that it would be useful if these behavioral tendencies that we infer from the behavior and the demeanor of other organisms, we need a word for it. You know, so instead of saying, I can detect when I'm about to attack somebody, right? And so when with my brilliant mirror neurons, when I see someone else that has all of the moves that I would have if I was about to, I never attack anybody, so this is just but if they had a facial expression and the actions that looked like a disposition to attack, I might want to put a word on that, like angry. You know, that's the internal state of anger. And so that if we were all just zombie robots, we could still be talking about anger. Nobody could do an emperor's new clothes on this and say, hey, you know, we're all talking about something that none of us have, right? We talk about it as if we had it. We all feel, I would have had this conversation about a pinch, etc., and all the words would have been the same, except in reality, and only God would know it, no feeling would be going on, and what our words really meant was just the disposition to do what we have a disposition to do when we're feeling something. Depression is a little bit of a harder one, right? I mean, when I'm angry, obviously I have a disposition to attack. If I'm hungry, I have a disposition to eat. If I know how to categorize and I see a mushroom, it's a disposition to say a mushroom and to pick it up. That's all disposition stuff. But depression, for example, moods are harder to pan out in terms of immediate dispositions. My only take on that is that the reason I can tell when somebody's depressed by certain facial expressions, etc. And what I mean by that is not just that they have this gloomy facial expression, but people that are depressed tend to be pessimistic and not try and you know, all of the other things. The longer term, also behavioral dispositions that go with depression. So even something as diffuse as a mood for zombies would have a label and would have behavioral correlates, not just behavioral correlates, but also neural correlates. So you could predict when a zombie was depressed, and exactly the same way you do it with us. Okay. So in a world in which there were just zombies, nothing that I want to talk about tonight and that I want to say matters would really matter. It's sort of an interesting question which I haven't considered is, all right, fine, we've handled moods, we've handled what would zombies mean when they talk about feeling. What do zombies mean when they talk about matter? I think it's the same story. You can have a zombie mattering which is simply another order of behavioral disposition. I mean, by the way, we end up talking about mattering just like zombies when it comes to animals, because we keep on talking about utilitarian, opportunistic things, and not what really matters, which is they're feeling something, they're suffering. Yes?
Could we, in that situation, establish that the zombies were zombies?
No, that's another issue.
I'm just curious.
Okay. The hard problem is how and why do we feel.
Right.
The other mind's problem is how can you know what? No, never mind what. That's trivial. That's a kind of a heterophenomenology question for Dennett. The way you know what I feel is you do your brain imagery on me, etc., etc., and you predict correctly that right now I'm thinking of a pink elephant. That's not it. How do we know that anything feels at all? Descartes listed this as one of the uncertainties. When he was heading towards the cogito, he said, among other things, you can't be sure that there's an outside world. If there is an outside world, you can't be sure that others feel that there are other minds, right? So there's the other mind's problem. I don't think that's, Steven says, to say that that's insoluble. It's not the hard problem, but it's insoluble. The cogito, according to the cogito, the only mind, the only feeling that you can be certain about, you can be reasonably certain, you can be certain that, reasonably certain that apples fall down and not up. That's ordinary scientific, an ordinary scientific law, gravitation. And you can't be sure about it for Cartesian reasons. Descartes is right, you can't be sure, but you don't need to be sure. It's enough to be pretty sure that apples are going to fall down and not start falling up tomorrow, okay? And in the same way, I can be pretty sure that you all feel. Believe it or not, and this is where we start behaving like something like zombies. There are compos mentis people who say, I'm not sure animals feel. How can I know for sure? You tend to say, have you never had a pet, at least? But I think there may even be people with pets who say that. What's behind that is the relevant things here. Those are the relevant questions. Why does other organisms' feeling matter so little to us? So let's start close to home. Philosophers love these divided railroad questions where 5 people are tied to the tracks over there and 2 people tied there. That's all. I like, among other things, Coetzee's article about this, where Elizabeth puts that in its place. That's all just sort of academic bullshit. But I can give you a version of the railroad problem that has some content that's relevant here. And it's going to be in the opposite direction from the direction that I want to go. But I acknowledge it. It's your usual railway. There's a runaway train. It's headed that way. And if it keeps going, it's on this track. And tied to the track, where it's headed, is your child. Tied to the other track is someone else's child. I want to suggest that anybody who pretends that they wouldn't switch is a psychopath. Okay? So, we're not psychopaths. There are psychopaths, there might be even, people who brutalize their own children. There might be psychopaths who actually might enjoy the idea of their child being run over by a train. But most people are not psychopaths, and most people would say, I'd switch. Yes, I'd be killing somebody. If you put it in another frame, they'd have more trouble. If you said, okay, a murderer comes to your house and they're going to, and they hold a gun to your child and they say, if you don't go next door and kill your neighbor's child, I'm going to kill your child. That's the harder one.
So we're never given the option of sacrifice.
Pardon you?
Kill yourself, to derail the train. And
No, it's not. That's not relevant. That's not relevant. We're
discussing
discussing
do that, I guess.
We're discussing psychopathy here. Yeah. Yes. In fact, killing yourself is part. It's similar to saving your child. No, we're discussing psychopathy. We're talking about where you don't care what harm is happening to someone else. Okay. But that having been said, having admitted that everybody has to take care of their own, otherwise they're psychopaths. What about the situation, not the train, the runaway train, where you're switching, completely unrealistic and not connected to anything you're encountering in this life, and nothing hanging from that, except that even hypothetically, not switching is tantamount to being a psychopath. What about all of you? Can I ask you to raise your hands if you're a vegan? Then I'm addressing now the non-vegans over here. Okay. you eat meat. It's also the vegetarians, but how about, are there non-vegan vegetarians also? Okay, so who are the non-vegan, non-vegetarian victims left? Okay, fine, I'm talking to you. Are you aware that it's so simple that there's only two little fundamental facts that are even at issue over here. Are you aware of the degree of suffering that goes into your food? And number two, and almost as important, are you aware that it's unnecessary? What I want to suggest is that people who eat meat and who are aware of the degree of suffering and who are aware that it's not necessary, in other words, they're doing it just because they feel like it, are indistinguishable from psychopaths in that respect. I suspect that what's really true is that when they say, I'm aware of it, they're not really aware of it. They've read about it, they saw a couple of images, but they don't really know. Either that, or else they profoundly believe that, no, it's not possible for a human being to survive and be healthy without eating meat. Yes?
I would ask them if they're aware of the degree of suffering that goes into the manufacture of their Apple laptop, or.
Let me defer that, because that's the trouble with that kind of question about, well, what about the child labor in Burma or whatever, is that it's similar to if somebody comes to your door with asking for a charity for muscular dystrophy, and you say, why are you asking for muscular dystrophy? What about Parkinsonism?
So I believe that it's incredibly important to campaign for animal rights, but I believe that for myself as a person, it's not necessarily that beneficial for me to be categorically a vegan or a vegetarian if I'm going to let things slide morally in terms of like buying, just like shopping at Walmart or driving a car a lot.
Nothing forces vegans to drive a car a lot or shop at Walmart. But there's certainly nothing about the fact that you shouldn't drive a lot and you shouldn't shop at Walmart that suggests that you shouldn't be vegan. Yeah?
I agree with him in the sense that if we were empathetic towards all the suffering in the world, in not only through like animal suffering, human suffering, that is like linked to everything we do in our normal lives, we wouldn't be able to bear it. We have to block it, because if we were, I don't think you can choose. You can choose to say this is important for me, and then I'm going to fight for this, and I'm not going to block it. I'm going to be aware. I'm going to go into it. But there are so many other things related to what we do that bring suffering with them that I don't think it's possible to be sensitive to everything.
So when they come for the muscular dystrophy, you say, but there's also Parkinsonism, there's also multiple sclerosis. I have to block it.
Or choose.
Yes, by all means, but there's no either or over here. You can be a vegan and. It's not a vegan or.
And a psychopath.
You can also, no, I don't think you're a psychopath. I think you should go into that. Yes.
So I hate to invoke the degrees of empathy again, or maybe I don't, but but I see at one end you have, of course, somebody who's completely not empathetic with humans would be a psychopath. I'm wondering if at the other end, someone who is extremely devoted to the well-being of an extremely unintelligent form of life, a very primitive form of life, let's say someone they were like a fanatic about snails, and they wanted to protect snail suffering, and they saw themselves as having sort of deep emotional relationships with snails that we wouldn't also pathologize in the other direction.
Well, if somebody, I like snails. I think I'm okay.
No, I like snails too.
I think that what we have in our supermarkets today is so flagrant that we can't even get to snails yet. Snails are later on the agenda.
Right.
Medical research is later on the agenda, because in the case of medical research, it doesn't pass the second criterion. One is, does it entail suffering? And second of all, is there any life or death interest involved? In the case of medical research, there's an argument for the fact that there is life or death interest involved. In the case of meat eating, there isn't, and also in the case of child labor in Borneo, there isn't a life or death. I mean, there's subtle economic issues that I want to get into and that are really another domain of specialty. It's not as obvious what you do in order to help the kids in Borneo as it is what you should do to help the pigs that are being prepared today for the agony tomorrow. Where does the degree of empathy come into this?
Well, I think for one thing, it would come in terms of, well, for one thing, there's a question. There's two separate questions. One is the killing, the act of killing, and how much suffering that actual act incurs, and then the other would be the conditions of living.
Yeah, of course.
And that would be, and so I can imagine degrees of empathy would come in a very easy way when you could say, well, I could kill and have killed a chicken, or I can kill and have killed a mosquito. Of course, is an easier one. But there would be other people who would say, I cannot do that, and I have not, and I would not do that. And they would be in a much less morally tenable position, I would find.
I've never understood, and this is a good time for you to explain, I've never understood that I can do it aspect has anything to do with this. I have a friend, I won't say who he is because he's actually quite well known. His father was a vegetarian, and he says, I'm a non-practicing vegetarian, he says of himself. And he said, and I went, and with a friend out west, and I went hunting, and I shot a bird just to see that I could do it, to see what it's like, etc. And some people even admire this. They say, well, good, he had the courage of his convictions. He's eating birds, so he's seeing whether he has the stomach to shoot them. And I don't see what's at issue over here except borderline psychopathy.
Well, it depends on the animal, wouldn't it? At that point, could we declare it was always borderline psychopathy?
Under those conditions, yes.
Oh yeah, under those conditions, like going out to just see if I could
I
make
swat mosquitoes too.
Right.
I said when there's no conflict of vital interest, and if I'm going to be infested with insects, I'm going to protect myself. If a carnivore jumped me, I'd protect myself as well. That's a conflict of vital interest. But going out to deliberately shoot a bird because I can do this, well, that's why I was saying, what is the pedestal on which you're putting the fact that you'll do it yourself? You'll go out there.
But I'm not talking about testing my mettle in order to do that. I'm saying I could do that in order to eat, and I would have even where my vital interests were at stake, I would have a much, much harder time doing that when it was a pig or when it was a cow. And so that to me actually, I mean, which would seem to come in as a variable if we're talking about degrees of
But where are we right now? Is this the train equivalent, the desert island equivalent of the train where the only way you can live is if you shoot that animal? Is that the example you're giving me?
No,
or
what I'm
just
saying,
shooting for just for the sake of it?
no, all I'm saying is then for me the act of killing is not of a chicken in itself is not objectionable, right? That's what I'm saying.
What are the circumstances? What I don't get is is this a life or death matter?
No, it's not a life or death matter.
So it's all right to kill a chicken even if it's not a life or death matter?
Yes, it's okay to kill a chicken
Why?
even if it's not a life or death matter. It's not that it's okay in the sense that in itself it should become sport, or that we should do it for any other reason than to feed ourselves.
No,
Right.
we've been a little bit more subtle here.
Right.
To nourish ourselves, we don't need to do it. But we need
No,
to do
we
it if
don't
we want to
need-
get that taste.
Right.
So you think that's okay?
But what about, going back to the question of killing, and does it always entail some sort of psychopathy? I mean, I'm sympathetic to the argument, but just stepping in as a token anthropologist here and looking at, if we cast aside the very unfortunate megafauna genocide in the Paleolithic, if you look at the kinds of relationships that exist among people and animals in a lot of hunting and gathering cultures, where very often there's a sense of gratefulness, of mutual, of empathy that is cultivated, and where, for the most part, most traditional hunting societies have not really decimated any kind of animal species. I mean, since the Paleolithic, and that rather unfortunate.
It's a tricky question because when I said we're setting aside life and death, conflict of life and death interest, that includes subsistence cultures, where the only way they can live is by killing meat. So I'm not talking about that. But the other part, I think Coetzee had just the right answer. I mean, Elizabeth what was her name?
Costello.
Costello, had just the right answer, which is, I have another way of putting it. I was once on a plane, it's the same issue. I was once on a plane with a observant, I didn't know him, but an observant, what do they call it, which is the very observant, see, help me out. What's the name for the very observant?
Gene?
What? There's a name for that group. What? The extremely orthodox. Haredim. Okay. So he was one of the Haredi, and it was he had ordered a glatt kosher meal, and they didn't have one, and I was a vegetarian. So I had a vegetarian meal, and I said, well, you can have mine. That should be fine. He said, no, we have stricter laws. And then we got into a conversation, and I said, well, and you know, if a Haredi of a certain sect discovers that there's anything Jewish about you at all, he'll try to convert you. And so this one said, well, why are you not observant? And I said, well, I gave it to him right away. I said, there's no way under the sun that I could observe the practices of any cult that treats animals the way, for example, Judaism does. He says, what's wrong with the way Judaism? We keep it clean. We make sure everything's clean. We're respectful of the animal. We eat it all. We even thank the animal and God for having it. And I said, tell that to the animal. It's okay what I'm doing with you because I'm doing it respectfully. I thank you for it. It's not necessary for my health or my survival, but my scripture says I should do it, and besides I like the taste. I'm doing it like the hunter-gatherers with their good relationship with their animals. Do you really want to make that argument?
No, plus, I mean, the evidence is all over the place for hunter-gatherers, but we're finding increasingly, even in the Paleolithic, that people hunted big game a lot less than we thought. That they sustained themselves with less protein than we thought, and that's also very interesting.
It's interesting, but I think it's undeniable that we have a carnivorous past and that present. Yes.
Just Darcy has a question.
Yes, Darcy.
Hi, sorry. I'm interested in this idea of survival, right? You're talking about your survival, and then on the raising of cows, or for example, like, you know, people who are in developing countries.
I've bracketed that.
Money,
Darcy.
these cows, do you know what you mean?
Darcy, is that your name? Darcy, I it went by very fast, but I bracketed that. I said subsistence cultures that need to do it are not what we're talking about now. We're talking about that huge chunk, which is unnecessary.
Okay. We're only talking about industrialized nations.
In the first instance, for present purposes, just. And bringing in the subsistence stuff at this point just scrambles it. Then some obvious truths about what we should be talking about are scrambled. They're saying, well, yeah, but what about that? That's something else, just like the train with the baby is something else. It's controversial as well. We probably don't see eye to eye on subsistence cultures either, but I'm not talking about them.
Okay, but what about people who actually depend, like they're farmers in the US, then on the meat industry? So for example, they wouldn't survive without it.
You're talking about Midwestern farmers in industrial farming. Yeah, well, that's something that we can talk about very directly. I mean, that's economic interest. It's not life and death interest. You know, it's like I could make it even more telling. You could talk about the poor immigrants who come to this country and who are sometimes illegal and who are roped into working in slaughterhouses. What about them? I mean, they got to make a living. What about that? I mean, I don't want to do all the talking.
I mean, aren't they often abused also as employees?
Yeah, but I don't think that's the answer. Yeah.
Well, I think That's something important too, like, because you see sometimes, I had never thought about the question like that, but you sometimes see the videos of the brutal way they treat animals, and you think these people must be truly psychopaths or have no empathy. But I also think that some groups of people that have been exposed to horrible conditions of life or have had gone through, like, they lose all empathy.
Yeah, well, this is not actually a talk about, yes, I'm talking about psychopathy and empathy, but the focus is on animals' feelings and not people's feelings. The slaughterhouse situation, I've read a little bit about this, and some of you may have read as well, is complicated. There's at least 3 types of people, and I don't know what the proportions are in slaughterhouses. There are pure victims. They're taken off the street, go to the job line, and they're sent to the slaughterhouse and just go ahead and do this. And some of them can't take it, and some of them really just stop doing it because they can't take it. There are also those who are brutalized by it, and there are those who take to it and who, in fact, look, there's a couple of books now about the correlation between true psychopathy and cruelty to animals. Psychopaths like to hurt sentient beings, whether they're human or animal. So the slaughterhouse contains a mix of all of those, and the one that I'm concerned with is not the sensitivity of the slaughterhouse worker, but the suffering of the animals. Okay, and I'm asking about us and not them. We're not slaughterhouse workers. And I guess the third world, the Midwestern farmers, right, whose livelihood depends on causing suffering to cows. Obviously, nobody's proposing an overnight solution to this. It would be chaos. But the direction in which it would go would be exactly the same direction as if you asked the same question about a slave-owning cotton farmer. Well, but my livelihood depends on it. Find another way to make a living.
I just want to add something.
Yes.
In West Africa, there's an ethnic group. I think they are mostly pastoralists, right? And they roam about, vast lands in West Africa. And oftentimes people will say that, well, they're called the Fulbe. That's the name of the group. That they have a lot more affection for their cows than they do for their children. So if a Fulbe man loses a woman, loses a cow, will probably be more grieved than if he loses a child.
Do they eat their children?
They do not eat their cows either.
But what do they do?
They sell them.
To be eaten?
Yeah.
Do they sell their children?
Well, but they mourn the cows more than they mourn the children.
Tell that to the cows. The mourning is for us. The respect is for us. The victims don't want your respect, they want their lives.
Here's something I'd contribute to that. As far as talking about the situation in the West or the developed world, I know there's 2 types of farming that we're going to see as far as livestock, and one is industrialized factory farms, which, I do eat meat. I do find that quite sickening to hear of. And then on the flip side, though, would be free range, or more like, picture the medieval farm, more of that description, the free range, the open. If I imagine the life of a cow, and this is as far as, my own attempt to visualize this, in the wild, it would go, the cow would eat, it would grow, it would eventually either die of old age or be predated upon. The cow in the same circumstance in, say, a free-range farm would enjoy the same existence. It would eat, it would grow, and then eventually would be predated upon by a human. What's your opinion on that?
That the wild cow is just there, and those are facts of nature. And I agree with Elizabeth Costello that don't go there yet. We're not going to start controlling the lion's quotas of gazelle. But there are no wild cows. They're the counterpart of cows. Cows are a domestic species that is bred, purpose-bred by us in order to be killed. That's a profound disanalogy. The shadier version of this objection is, well, they're better off with us than they are in the wild. They aren't in the wild. We created them. We breed them in order to kill them. None of these analogies work about how much better they would have done in the wild. They would be doing much better because they wouldn't even exist.
Well, I suppose we did eventually. We did originally adopt like the auroch or whatever wild species of cow initially existed. And yeah, we've certainly bred them into an unrecognizable format. They're much more massive, they're much more meaty, they produce more milk. Those are all human interventions, but I think you could still...
We also did it, we originally did it at a time, this was this controversial Paleolithic period, when it was a life and death matter for us. Today it isn't, at least not out of subsistence.